So I live alone in a small, one-bedroom apartment in a small, single-story building. It's only a few miles away from the fast food restaurant where I work. I get to ride my bicycle to and from, which saves me a ton on gas. The apartment itself is perfect for me. The rent's low and, well, I don't need things to be fancy. Of course, the landlord loves me because I handle my own repairs, or just deal with it and don't complain. Which must be refreshing for him, considering how often stuff just doesn't quite work right around here. A perfect example of this is the heat. For whatever reason, it gives out at least once a week. Rather than make a fuss and complain about it every other week or so, I've learned to adapt. The heater itself is inside of a small cabinet in the hallway, appropriately located right next to the fuse box. If I get home and it's unusually chilly inside, I just have to flip the fuse box back to on, play with the buttons a bit, and relight the pilot light, and I'm back in business. This happens so often that I've just started keeping one of those long, flexible barbecue lighters right inside the little cabinet there. So anyway, last week I get the Rona. Being about 50 years too young to be in any real danger, all I experienced was a few days of mild fatigue and a loss of smell and taste. The fatigue made the long shifts and bike rides really exhausting. But the health benefits of not being able to taste probably more than made up for that. It's kind of amazing how many more vegetables you eat when everything kind of tastes the same. Why should I snag a chicken nugget or a frozen cookie when it tastes no different than a handful of lettuce? Anyway, on Thursday, I worked a long shift. Between the bike ride in, the 12 hours on my feet, and then the bike ride home, I was absolutely pooped and very sore. You could have probably confused me for Frankenstein the way I was walking when I got to my door. Within a few seconds of getting inside, I had this noticeable sense of mild dread. My stomach was giving me this feeling not entirely dissimilar to that of sitting in my room and waiting for my mom to get home to slap me silly for getting suspended from school. I had nothing to be nervous about, but for whatever reason, I really was. I chalked the anxious tummy up to the exhaustion and made a beeline to the shower. I needed to wash off the quarter-inch of grease that coated my entire body, sure, but what I really wanted was that soothing hot water to help with my aching muscles. So I turned on the water and waited for it to get hot, and waited, and waited. The water stayed ice cold. And I sighed as I checked the bathroom closet to see that the water's pilot light had gone out. Great. There's no way I was going to be staying awake long enough to wait for 20 gallons to get up to a bearable temperature. But hey, at least all the grease would make my bed sheets feel as smooth as satin for the night. It was about at that time that the internal heat from the bike ride had worn off, and I realized that the apartment itself was a bit nippy as well. I sighed once again and made my way to the hallway cabinet, and sure enough, the heater was off and the flame was out. The fuse in the nearby box hadn't been tripped, and the heater's display lit up when I pushed the buttons, so at least half of my job was done, but the lighter was still missing. I checked the floor in case it had fallen. I checked the nearby closet in case it had rolled or something. I checked the bathroom in case I had forgotten and used it for a candle. Nothing. I went to the kitchen drawer to grab a spare. Nothing. I went to the back window ledge to grab the medicinal one. Nothing. I did notice that I'd left the window open though, which certainly didn't help with the cold. I closed it, and throughout this entire back and forth journey through the apartment, I must have patted my pants pockets about 1,000 times, expecting one to be in there. But no such luck. Finally, I decided that if the world was going to hide all my lighters from me, that I'd go and make my own. Channeling my inner household hacker, I withdrew a long spaghetti noodle from the box and went over to the stove to light it. The friggin' knob had fallen off and I couldn't find it anywhere. Not cool. I dropped the noodle to the floor and huffed and puffed my way to the bathroom. This, I thought to myself, was all going to be tomorrow me's problem. By this point, my legs and back were stiff as a board, my stomach was really churning, and I just wanted to sleep. It's not like it was freezing outside, I'd just use an extra comforter on the bed and I'd be fine. It was a little difficult to fall asleep between the nervousness and the bodily discomfort, but at least I was warm, snug, and slimy. I was a toasty little slug. That night, though, I had the craziest, most vivid, and strangely unsettling dream of my life. It started with me lying on my back and looking up at the evening sky. My whole body burned, like it was one big paper cut slathered in sanitizer. And even though I knew for sure this had to be a dream, I still had absolutely no control over myself. It was like I was watching a cutscene in a first-person shooter or something like that. And so I stood up from the grass to see the front of my apartment. And so I approached the door and tried to open it, but it was locked. So I walked around back, opened the window, and crawled inside. Again, all on autopilot. Once inside, I walked up to the hallway cabinet, opened it up, and grabbed a lighter. Then I went to the kitchen junk drawer and grabbed the 3 or 4 lighters in there. I twisted the knob off the stove too. It was like I was retracing my steps from after I got home, but actually finding what I was looking for instead of, not finding it. But I tell you, every movement hurt. Every time I touched something, it stung. And as I walked by the bathroom door, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and froze. Not by choice, because, again, I was just an observer in this freaky dream, but, well, I would have frozen regardless if I had any control over this myself. The person looking at me from the mirror was only barely me. It had my frame and it was wearing the tattered remains of my work shirt, but it was missing certain defining characteristics that really make me, me. Things like skin and hair. It looked like some lonely chef had made a companion, and the only 2 ingredients handy were meatloaf and hash browns. It looked like a scarecrow made out of inside-out ravioli around some Rice Krispies. I, or it, or whoever the main character of this dream was, stared at itself for a while, reaching up and touching its face like it was just as surprised and grossed out as I was. The eyes looked sad. It turned and looked back toward the open window in the bedroom. And then I couldn't breathe and started to panic, and I woke up and rolled over and threw up everywhere. I was back in my room under my 2 blankets. Sort of, I think. I was very disoriented. I was soaking wet from sweat and vomit. The room was spinning. I tried to get up, but I was too weak and I collapsed on the ground right next to the bed, tangled in the bedding. I threw up again, but I could barely think from all the heaving, both dry and wet. And with effort far greater than should have been necessary, I crawled out of the bedroom, into the hallway, then through the living room. And behind me I left a snail trail of the previous day's lunch and half-digested lettuce, smeared by the twisted sheets that followed behind me. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I had to get out. It felt like I was breathing through a damp sock. The air was cold, but it was heavy and stifling. The front door handle was a million miles into the air, but I still managed to reach it and pull open the door. The frosty morning air hit me like a baseball bat and I was gone. I woke up 2 days later in a hospital bed. I guess my neighbor found me when she left for work that morning. If I were to guess, there must have been something about a buck-naked man wrapped in bed sheets and soaked in throw-up, lying unconscious halfway outside a front door, that might have caught her attention. It was either that or the overpowering smell of gas coming from the apartment. That's right, my inability to smell had nearly gotten me killed. See, apparently, a temporary gas outage in the area combined with the heater going out had lined up just right so that the automatic shutoff hadn't been tripped like it normally is. However, even with all of this having happened, couldn't have happened more fortuitously. For instance, if that back window hadn't have been open for most of the day, I wouldn't have lasted nearly as long as I did. If I'd been sleeping on my side, I wouldn't have woken up from choking on my vomit, and I would have died in my sleep. If I hadn't lost every single gosh darn lighter in the house along with the stove knob, oh boy. Me and everyone else would have been blown sky high. I did eventually find all those lighters, and that stove knob, by the way. They were all in a pile, outside on the grass, behind the back window.